ringing bell. South Africa is no country for young people. Those are the startling words of Ann Bernstein, who is Executive Director of the Centre for Development and Enterprise, CDE. They conducted research into youth unemployment, and she joins us in the studio now. And you do these big chunks of research. There's lots of density, lots of rich stuff in it. We can't do more than scratch the surface here. So what can we scratch off that you've got out of this research report?
Look, I think the most important thing is to say that 7.5 million young people aged 15 to 34 are not in employment, education or training. That's about 40% of the youth population. It's stunning. This in the country, we have a few to compete, but it doesn't even seem to register. There's a strange complacency among both government and business and civic leaders who look at youth unemployment and they propose some small project. Now, there are lots of small projects all over South Africa. Many of them are great, but the numbers are marginal. So we're saying that if you're serious about youth unemployment, and we should be, we have to get back to growth, and not just growth at a much faster pace, but it has to be labor intensive. We have to make some changes in our labor laws to open up this economy to low-skill manufacturing, to a lot more tourism, which will create some low-skill jobs. But, you know, we need jobs for the labor force South Africa has, not the skilled labor force we wish we had. And that's been the government strategy for the last 20 years. High skill, high wage, and we'll fix youth unemployment. This is not working. It's failed. Our numbers are the biggest indictment of the government strategy since we've become a democracy that's imaginable.
Let's also talk about artificial intelligence, Anne, and how that's going to impact the jobs going forward. When you talk about the lower end, where we need to start creating jobs, especially for manufacturing and getting all those low-skilled workers, but then they say the robots are the ones that are going to take over those low-skilled jobs. Now, how do we then get around that?
Well, there's lots of hype about automation, and of course it's taking place. South Africa currently puts enormous amounts of subsidies into the car industry, where automation is taking place hand over fist. So let's ask the higher skilled jobs, what's going to happen there? We know that in some 85 million low-skilled jobs are not automating in China, and they're moving out of China because wages are too high. And they're moving to other places in Asia and to places in Ethiopia. And too many South Africans use now automation as an excuse to not deal with the policy reforms that are required to make this a much more labor-intensive economy. Of course, automation is happening, but not yet in textiles of the T-shirts and your sneakers, or low-level electronics, or toy assembly. And let's get some. So, yes, it's coming. We don't know when. It looks to us like we've got at least 10 to 15 years to try and get a lot of jobs. And it's hard to predict the future, but automation is going to affect everything. But we shouldn't breathe in too much about the hype.
Easy to attack rigid labour legislation, high minimum wages, effectively very difficult to dismiss people. Business needs to come to the party too and be more flexible, shouldn't they?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what that means. The government introduces policies that are...
In terms of automation, for example. And they say we need fewer people and it's cheaper to automate.
Well, this is a much more complex discussion. So when ATMs were introduced, lots of people said, oh, there go tellers' jobs. Well, we know that a lot more tellers have been employed since then because of all sorts of other things. So it's hard to predict exactly what's going to happen. So on the one hand, what we're saying in our reports, and there are 3 of them, we're saying that South Africa has to get much more labor-intensive, much more rapid growth. And these are the things we have to do. And we can't keep avoiding the labor reforms because look at the results. All these young people who generally come out of terrible schooling, who come from communities where very few people work, and we don't have jobs for those sorts of people. And it shouldn't be seen as the sort of the end point. This is an entry-level job. You can always move up in a factory. You can aspire to manage other people. Businesses, on the other hand, I think need to stop talking about projects and talk about fundamental reform. So last year the CEO initiative was all about sort of these initiatives they're going to take that are going to help South Africa. Well, terrific if they can implement them. But what we need are fundamental reforms. We need business leaders to be crystal clear about the key issues that are going to get us more jobs in this country.
You talk about schooling, and you've also done a report on the teacher professional standards in South Africa. What have you found there?
Look, the most important issue besides the jargon is accountability. How do we get teachers and principals accountable for their jobs? Now, if David or I did not come to work on a Monday or a Friday, and when we did come to work we didn't bother to do any work, we'd be fired. But that's not what's happening in South Africa's schooling system. We have calculated, our researchers indicate that if teachers, it's hard to hold you accountable for being an excellent maths teacher if you didn't get an excellent maths training. Fair enough, fix the training. On the other hand, we can hold you accountable for coming to work for professional standards. Come to work on time, do the job we pay you to do to the best of your ability, and work with your students for the maximum amount of time. It's been calculated that if that actually happened, which is not happening, we could get 40% more learning time in our schools than we do just by holding you accountable, teachers accountable for what it's reasonable to hold them accountable for. So that's not happening. And around the world, people are talking about professional standards for teachers as a way of the profession monitoring itself and setting some standards like any other profession. And we're proposing, on the basis of a lot of research and international expertise, that this could help South Africa. But it doesn't help to avoid the big issue of performance management, which we could be introducing tomorrow.
Yep. That's Ann Bernstein. She's Executive Director at the CDE. Now time for our Closing Gate feature. That's, of course, our trip to the gates of our wildlife reserve. Let's have a look at the latest instalment.
Hello and welcome to Closing Gate. I'm Rofwa Madzana, and with me, as always, is Nadav Ossendriver, who's the CEO of Latest Sightings. Nadav, what did the gate close on today?
So recently there have been a lot of amazing lion sightings, so I decided to really put two of the really good ones together. This is obviously, it's no lions yet, but here's a pack of hyenas and some jackals and vultures, yeah, feasting on a carcass. And